wasting money on cures. Forgot how to fix myself. They say that time is free. Then why is it so precious? Oh, I'll save memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. Time is running out. Time is running out. Lately I've lost my track. I've sailed the deeper seas, hoping to find something to bring back better times. Oh, I'll save memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. But time is running out. 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 Time is running. Time is running out. But time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can be over. They can't be over now. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over now. Time is running out. Time is running out. Time is running out.
Hi there, welcome to our live revision session on financial economics. Hope the revision's going well and you're making good progress. Obviously, time is running out in terms of less than a month now to the papers, but there's an enormous amount you can do if you just stick at it day by day. Work on those tricky topics, make sure your revision notes are in great shape, work as a team, find people with like mind, like spirit, and you can achieve a lot. Well, we're on the road in 2 weeks' time. We'll be in London. So 29th and 30th of April, we are at View Stratford, one of our favourite venues. And then we go across on the Central Line, West London to White City for 2 days on Thursday the 1st and Friday the 2nd of May. So 2 days for AQA, 2 days for EdXL. We love these days. There are lots of tickets being sold. And in particular, it's a great chance for maybe a change of view, a change of scene, if you like. If you want to lock in revision and have a day with us, focusing on exam technique, revision skills, how to smash a 10 marker in AQA, how to really nail the 8 markers in EdXL. So please do check our website if you want to grab a ticket with a friend for our live Grey Booster events. So today it's all about financial economics. We've got a mixture of questions, including some calcs, some multiple choice, and some short answer questions. Now, financial economics appears in different parts of the spec in different boards. So AQA, a lot of detail, EdXL, more market failure. So paper one, AQA tends to be a bit more macro. And of course, keep in mind, financial can appear on any paper in the synoptic question. Here's our first question. How do commercial banks create credit in the economy? So most of our questions here are about banking and debt today. Okay, interestingly, a few people saying D, by exchanging government bonds for cash through QE. Now, D is a plausible answer because through QE, banks do get more cash which then would allow them to create credit. But the actual exchange of bonds for cash isn't credit creation. So George is saying D question mark. The answer actually is C. So what QE does, it increases the liquidity of the banking system, which in theory allows them to lend out more, but that's not the same as creating credit. Now C, by lending out a fraction of deposits, creating new deposits. So I got a mortgage last year and had my mortgage application approved, and suddenly, hey presto, X £100,000 appeared in my account, which I could then use to buy a property. The bank was creating the money, process of alchemy. Here's question number 2. Now this is a tricky question, so take a moment on this one, please. Which one of the following might lead to a fall in commercial bank lending to UK households? This one is tricky. Okay, so I've deliberately tried to create some questions today where there are plausible distractors, because they are trying to make the multiple choice questions a little harder. So which of the following might lead to a fall in bank lending? George and Chloe, James, Katie, and Nathan all saying B. A couple of people saying C. I'll explain why it's not C in a moment. The right answer is B. Yeah, so that means, the reason why B is the right answer, that means that banks would have to hold back more of their assets in tier 1 capital and illiquid assets, government bonds, for example, which would reduce their ability to lend out. It's not C. A counter-cyclical capital buffer is where banks have to hold 1 or 2% of their deposits in extra capital as a buffer stock, if you like. The government sets that, or the Bank of England sets it. If that fell, they wouldn't have to hold back as much in capital. So in theory, they could then lend it out. Nice question. I like that question. By the way, Brooke is saying he or she is tuning in Sutton Valence, all the way from Sutton Valence. And globalization, of course, is the death of distance. Here's question 3. Love this question. What is moral hazard in the context of banking? Now, this is a lot of people saying, never heard of this for Edexcel. This is Edexcel, okay, and Takeaway as well. So what's moral hazard in the context of banking? What do we think? Answers flying in here, absolutely flying. Our great community of users, well over 300 people live with us at the moment. The answer is indeed C. And banks take risks because they believe they were bailed out. Of course, that can then lead to higher risk-taking behavior, and that can increase financial instability. Question number 4 coming up. Which of the following best illustrates systemic risk affecting the real economy? Now, this comes under market failure in financial markets for Edexcel, and it comes under the wider impact of banking with AQA. Which of the following best illustrates systemic risk? A few people saying A. Regional bank closes without impacting wider credit availability. It's not A, because that would be the system being able to cope with the bank closure. Most people saying C, and the answer is indeed C. And of course, we saw that in the global financial crisis, that when the banks stopped lending to each other, that precipitated a much wider credit crunch, a systemic credit crunch, affecting not just interbank lending, but mortgage lending, loans to businesses, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Question number 5, our last multiple choice question. How might speculation contribute to financial market failure? Okay. How might speculation contribute to financial market failure? This is important for all exam boards, IEL, OCR, EDUCAS. Good answers. Well done, everybody. Everybody coming in there. Following the live stream here, it looks like Nermit and Pablo and Anna have all got the right answer. And the answer is indeed A. I hesitate, by the way, when I'm doing financial economics. When I teach this to a level of a lot of depth online and with my students. And so those of you who have heard of it, the Minsky hypothesis, that stability breeds instability, that you get an asset bubble and people think, well, this time it's different. House prices can keep rising, or the price of Bitcoin can carry on rising, but bubbles do collapse because they take fundamental values well over fair value. Sorry, the actual value is well over fundamental and fair value, and that creates dynamic instability. Brilliant stuff. Now, maybe for some of you, some of this stuff is new. You haven't been taught this stuff, because we do find that lots of schools cover financial economics in bits and pieces, and some teachers love this part of the sport, of that this part of the spec. Tilly says, what was that theory called again? It's called the Minsky hypothesis. Minsky, let me spell it for you, Tilly. Minsky. Minsky. Hyman Minsky was a Marxist economist, beloved and revered at the SOAS and London School of Economics. There we go. Thank you, Michael. Hyman Minsky. Now, I know a lot of students actually look at the Minsky hypothesis. It's not on the spec, but it's a brilliant theory to study, particularly in the wake of the financial crisis. Okay, so don't worry if you didn't get all of those right. If you got 5 out of 5, that's pretty impressive. Let's do a few calculations. I'm thinking here AQA 2-mark questions. I'm thinking Edexcel section A. Okay, so I've got 4 calculation questions for you. In 2000, total household debt was 697 billion. By 2024, it increased to 2135 billion. Over to you. There's no time on this. We'll just post the answers in the chat window as they come through. Can you please calculate the percentage increase in household debt over this period? Sponge says, how likely is a 25 market purely on financial markets? Good question. Probably quite likely, given we haven't had one yet. If you're doing the Edexcel board, I think the idea of the interplay between financial markets and real markets is quite strong, and it does appear on the spec, so you have to be prepared for anything. Richard, Naima, Nathan, Lucas and Ben, let's double check. Now, Ben said 206%. Ben, I don't want to be mean here, but you have to put 0.3% because it does say to 1 decimal place. So if this was a 2-mark question with AQA, they're sporting Santa and Katie. U equals old. Yeah, that's right. So it's always the change divided by the original. So please, it's 206.3%. Okay. AQA, by the way, if you don't put the point decimal place, you only get 1 mark. Okay. Question number 2. Here we go. In 2022, the household debt to income ratio was 125.4%. It was 120.0% in 2024. Calculate the percentage point change in the debt to income ratio. Zainab says, could it be a 25 marker for AQA? Yes, they can ask 25 mark questions on any significant part of the specification. The fact they haven't yet done that is not an indication that it won't appear. By the way, please avoid all these predicted paper malarkey. It's absolute nonsense. The key to good exam success is working hard, being smart and savvy, and making sure you're ready for whatever comes out of the gates. And here we go. So it's the answer is it's 5.4 percentage points. So thank you to JT there. It's not 5.4%. It's 5.4 percentage points. I know what you're thinking, Geoff, come on, get a grip. But it's a percentage point change because it's a change in what's already a percentage. Love it. Fantastic. So, sorry, Taylor says, can we explain this? You already got a percentage. So you're not trying to calculate a percentage change. Actually, the calc is easy, isn't it? It's just minus 5.4. But it's percentage points because it's already a percentage. Okay. Does it matter if you add the minus sign? Yes, because it's percentage point change. Number 3, calculate an index number series for household debt. So we know in 2000, debt was 697 billion. Use that as the base year. Can you calculate for me an index number for 2024 when debt, as we know, climbed to 2135? As you're doing this calculation, George says, I haven't revised any macro yet. You reckon I can wing it? To which, George, I have a very simple answer. No. So here's our index coming up. Anas is flying through, calculating. James has gone for 206.3. Quite a few actually have gone for 306. A lot of people saying 206.3. Not quite. Ben and Anna and JT, it's 306.3. Correct answer there from Helen and Ben. So it's you just simply convert. So it's 306. So it's 2135. The value for 2024 divided by the base year value 697, multiplied by 100 to get your index. And the way to express this, everybody, is it's 306.3 brackets 2000 equals 100. Always put those brackets in at the end because that tells the examiner that it's the index relative to the base year value, whatever that value was in 2000. Right, two more questions, two more calcs. Hope these are useful. I'm just practicing 2 mark here. Oh no, sorry, I've only got four calculation questions. This is our last one. Yes, I like this one. Calculate the 5-firm concentration ratio for the mortgage market in 2023. So Lloyds Bank leads the way. It's the biggest mortgage lender. Of course, it includes the Halifax, Lloyds Banking Group. Lloyds and Halifax merged. They divested TSB. So I hope I've done my maths correctly. I think I might have made a calculation error. A lot of people saying it's just over 60. I think I might be one down. So if you've got it right and I've got it wrong, I bow to your better judgment. Phoebe and Toby and Safal and Ella are all telling me I've got the wrong answer. Here's my answer on the screen, which I think is incorrect. I can't add up. It should be 60.7. I've missed one. Should have carried an extra one. So the answer is 60.7%. My bad. My apologies there. Well done to Louis and Nicole and Chris getting that right. Now, that's important because, of course, a 5-firm ratio above 60% means it's an oligopoly. I will change the PowerPoint for those of you who download. Okay, this is this live just questions or going through content? Well, we go through content through the medium of questions, and I try and do some teaching points in a second or two. Thinking of which, Minzy says, Geoff, we all make mistakes. Don't worry. Thank you for that. That is a really nice thought. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Geoff. Let's crack on because Katie wants some content. Now, I'm going to give you a minute on the clock here. Let's see what we can come up with. Do have a go at writing your own answer here. There's often some misconceptions. Explain how commercial banks create credit. Over to you. Some great answers coming through, everybody. Well done. Keep it going. Yeah, some lovely answers. And those of you who are watching our live stream, keep an eye on the chat window because what we get some amazing answers from students that are actually better than my own answers. So I'm trying to learn as well. So most of you are getting the key idea here is that they're converting short-term deposits into long-term loans. So banks, here's Fran's point, depositors invest in banks and banks keep a percentage as reserves and lend out the rest. This is true. Now, what we have to do is we have to be a little bit more precise because a lot of students assume that you can only lend out if you've attracted deposits. So, but Lloyds and Barclays couldn't lend out if people didn't put money in their bank accounts as savers, which is incorrect. In fact, most banks, including banks that have failed, don't do that. So banks create credit by approving a loan. That is the key thing is by approving a loan, that is the moment when new money is created. They then create a new deposit, £5,000, £20,000, £200,000. That money is then deposited in a borrower's account. And of course, many of you are saying banks operate under a fractional reserve system. They're only required to keep a small fraction, sometimes less than 1% of deposits as reserves, and they can, in theory, lend out the rest. Okay. Helen saying my college has not mentioned any of this. Well, this is quite important. It's certainly if you're doing AQA, you have to understand how banks create credit. How do they create credit? By approving loan requests. It could be a student loan, it could be a bank overdraft, it could be a mortgage, and that the moment they create the loan, new money is created within the banking system. However, and I put this in green because this is a super important teaching point. A commercial bank does not need to attract deposits first. So a lot of people say people save with banks and then banks lend out. No. Banks can borrow money from the wholesale market. They can raise money by issuing equity. So stockholders, shareholders. So banks can raise capital, which can then be lent out. Nikita says, is this topic in Excel? Well, yes, because you can't really understand financial market failure unless you understand how banks create credit. Alex says, it is on Excel, guys. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. Okay, now this is important because I think debt could well be a feature of this year's exams. Can you explain, please, with an example maybe for each on a minute on the clock, the difference between secured and unsecured debt? Have a go. Ben says, what's the wholesale money market? Bro, it's where banks can go and borrow from other banks. Whereas if you lend money to me, that's the retail market. Yeah, and Joe's got a lovely answer there. If we can, add an example for application. This is largely AQA. You do need to know this difference for AQA. Can come up on multiple choice, for example. Thank you to Michael there for a great answer. Yeah. Flora and Satya, really good, using the word collateral and some really good application there. Absolutely fantastic. The answers are flowing through. We can't choose all the answers that flow through. Of course, we just do our best to pick out some good ones, but do keep them coming through. Yeah, some great stuff. Excellent. I think it was here's my answer. Secured debt is backed by collateral, the asset. Collateral is an asset the lender can take back if the borrower fails to repay. So obviously, a housing mortgage, if you fail to keep up with the repayments, the bank can take the property back. The famous scene, of course, in The Big Short, when they go to Florida to see if there's a housing bubble, and they find lots of houses have already been locked up, where the owners have decided just to hand the keys in and leave. Unsecured debt not tied to an asset. Lenders rely on your credit history, your credit score, and also your income to decide whether to lend. And of course, a good example of that is credit card debt. Excellent. Really good answers. Really good. So mortgage would be secured debt. Credit card would be unsecured. Great stuff. Let's move on. So we're going to look at a couple of mini case studies that I think could well feature this year. So there's the data. The data is on household debt. As you can see, the level of debt in the economy is pretty huge. A lot of it's mortgage debt. But as a share of disposable income, it surged just before the global financial crisis. It's still above 100% of disposable income. So all the debt in the UK is about 75% of the size of the economy. It's 120% of disposable incomes. So here's my question for the next little exercise. Given that data, can you give me one benefit to the economy of an increase in household debt and one risk to an economy of an increase in household debt? Have a go, please. Yeah, and James makes that, it's not an obvious point, it's a good point. You can go back to year 12 economics in financial economics. In the short run, it can boost AD and therefore the gap growth. In other words, close the gap between GDP and actual potential GDP. So there's nothing wrong with borrowing money if it's, for example, to fund a mortgage, and if that stimulates house building, for example. Zineb talks about everyone watched The Big Short to find out. Absolutely, it's one of those great films. Actually, interestingly, couple of points came into my mind. First of all, if you want to take a break from revision, do watch The Big Short or watch The Bank of Dave. I think there's a second film coming out, isn't there? So do have a break from revision. Secondly, what we get when we do financial economics, we get a load of people saying, well, we haven't been taught this, we haven't been taught that. Nothing I can do about that. Well, there is actually. I've done about 50 economic shorts on financial economics. So if you go to our YouTube channel, there's a whole playlist of shorts, 60-second shorts on financial economics. If you want to binge watch those, that will give you a fantastic background on the basics. Here are my 2 points. I've gone for James's point, really, that an increase in household debt can support strong consumer spending. Okay, and I've linked it, James, to the Keynesian multiplier effect. So if consumers are borrowing more, there could be a multiplier effect. It could drive AD, it could drive investment if people are borrowing money. The big risk, which many of you have talked about, okay, and I think, well, a lot of people kind of hinted at, okay, households with high debt reduce their spending during downturns. So if you have a high level of household debt, it can actually make the downturn worse, make the cycle more unstable, more amplified. So when households are exposed to an increase in interest rates, and which then poses risks, systemic risks for the banking system. Okay. A couple of people saying, can we watch The Wolf of Wall Street as revision? Well, you can. It's not as good as The Big Short or The Bank of Dave. JT Galaxy, a lovely point here. Nice link from JT. Getting a house will boost AD because of increased consumption. If people buy a house, they tend to kit it out, new furniture, furnishings, etc. Putting the Wi-Fi in and spending money on this, that, and everything. Okay, good stuff. Next, move on to the next topic. Conscious of time. Oh, this is really important. Okay, Katie was asking, is this linked to monetary policy? Yes, it is. Okay, here's a chart showing the base rate of interest, currently 4.5%, I think, but up to the end of last year, this chart, and credit card interest rates, which are a multiple more expensive. Okay, so here's my question. Can you give me 2 reasons why credit card debt is more expensive than the base rate set by the Bank of England? Have a go. So this really is quite important stuff. The cost of credit in a financial economy like the UK. We're looking for economic reasons. Why are average credit card rates 25%, whereas the base rate set by the Bank of England is only 5% or less? Great answer there from George. Well done. Geoff, if you can find Geoff's answer, please, our production team, a really subtle answer, which I think hints at somebody who clearly understands financial economics. Asymmetric information for credit card lenders means they require a higher rate of return due to the risk of default. So that's one of the best answers I've ever seen in the live stream. If you're doing Excel, by the way, that could come under financial market failure. Information gaps, asymmetric information, leads to higher borrowing costs for everybody. So it's a little bit like the adverse selection in the health insurance market. Absolutely fantastic. Really good stuff. Lots of answers talking about credit card debt is unsecured and lenders take on more risk. The risk of default is high. Wow. Yeah, well, I think absolutely. With Geoff, you are now the GOAT, certainly for today. But take that kind of level of intuition and nuanced economics into the exam. Absolutely fantastic. Okay, I've gone for high risk of default. Credit card debts are unsecured debt. So, the lenders will pass it on, especially if the demand for loans has a low price elasticity of demand. So Geoff linked it beautifully to asymmetric information. I'm linking this to low PED. If you have to take out a loan, you're probably going to be you're not sensitive to the rate of interest set. Picky Doc says, "Don't ignore me, Geoff." I think that suggests they want a little appearance on the screen, but who knows? That our production team very rarely do that. There we go. And then I've also added a bit of behavioral economics. So some consumers don't pay off their full balance monthly. Yes, so a lot of people have a default setting, which is they forget to pay off their debt at the end of each month. So lenders set high rates knowing that people will carry balances for extended periods, and that becomes a major source of super normal profit. There's a kind of default behavior which AQA students will know about. Sporting Fibre says, "Geoff versus Geoff battle to be GOAT. This is a battle which will continue in future live streams." Okay, cracking on, really good stuff. We're moving on here. Let's finish with, let's move on to the next. Yes, we're going to finish with the bank failure topic. Silicon Valley. Now, again, keep in mind, topical issues. Your exam was set in 2023. There were bank failures, including SVB. The bank invested heavily in long-term bonds to raise money to then lend out. But those bonds started falling in value when the Fed started raising interest rates. SVB's clientele, mainly tech startups, began withdrawing funds, prompting the bank to sell assets at a loss. That led to a bank run, $42 billion withdrawn in the bank in a single day. Wow. Here's my question. I think it's the final question. Yes, last at the evaluation one. Can you give me one argument, build me an argument for bailing out a bank banks that fail, or an argument for saying, no, we should let banks fail? So our last question today. Have a go. So should we allow banks to fail? Kale has come in with a very pithy, nuanced answer. Let's see what else we can get. Yeah, well done, Tammy. Luca comes in with an evaluation point. It depends on the size of the bank and the asset base. Yeah, lovely. I mean, again, a lot of you talking about moral hazard, a lot of you talking about confidence, trust in the system. It's a big issue. So, Sophia, too big to fail and systemic risk of crisis. Nice, okay, nice use of those concepts. Against moral hazard, okay. Schumpeter and Hayek. Yes, excellent. Really good. Really good. TVK says banks are a big finance source. So, could be consequences of allowing banks to fail for revenue, for financial system stability, for attracting investment. Of course, there's also a risk for depositors, although there is now a depositor protection insurance. Here are my 2 points to finish with today. I have gone for. The Keynesian school would probably argue for bailouts to limit systemic risk, to mitigate the negative effects for the real economy. The Keynesians argue that banking failures can have quite significant externalities, in particular higher taxes if the economy goes into a downturn, risk of deflation, all that kind of stuff. So there can be some externalities there. Whereas the Austrian school, including Schumpeter, Hayek, von Mises, letting banks fail promotes market discipline and prevents moral hazard. And interestingly, they also develop the point it encourages creative destruction. So new banks emerge out of old systems, Monzo, Revolut, Starling, all those banks emerging out of the global financial crisis with new business models, innovative banking models to replace failed institutions. There we go. Half an hour today on financial markets. Thank you, as always, to everybody for your amazing contributions. I love these sessions because it energizes me. We get some super economists. I know some of you sitting on offers of amazing courses at great unis, but also the willingness to help each other as we go through these sessions. Absolutely fantastic. So Minzy says, I'm hosting an economics A-level party on July the 1st, if you guys want to come. I'm away actually that weekend, but Minzy is now in charge of the ticketing. Tomorrow we are doing market structure and economic efficiency, big stuff, big topics. And next week we do 3. I think we're definitely doing nationalisation and privatisation for sure. We're doing one on, I can't remember, we're doing one on market failure. And I think we're doing one on international economics. Okay. George says, thank you. Really good things my teacher didn't cover it. Well, George, I do recommend that little playlist of shorts on financial economics, because I think it's one of my better playlists. Well, everybody, fantastic effort. And please spread the word to people. And let's try and get even more people come to our live streams. But most importantly, stay happy, stay healthy, stay curious, and see you sometime soon.